We're starving for that good music, and I'm going to tell you what my favorite album is. Kanye West, iconic rapper. Icon. Not Akon, not Acorn, icon. I've been in preparation for this video for quite a few months, only because I needed to go back and re-listen to Kanye's discog to kind of be able to make this video. And over the past few months I've been kind of re-listening to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, College Dropout, Yeezus, The Life of Pablo, so on and so forth. And this weekend I figured I was ready. I figured I was back in the business. I figured I was back in order to be able to release this video with all of the projects kind of fresh in my mind. And I'm going to be giving you the best Kanye album in my opinion. Keep in mind that just because there is going to be a least favorite, I am not calling any of these albums bad, as I do not believe Kanye West has just released just a bad project. Definitely projects that haven't been my favorite, but the only album on this entire video that is going to be necessarily bad in my opinion is the Yeezus record. Everything else is actually at least decent or good in my opinion. Keep in mind I will not be including his mixtape, and I also will not be including any compilations, body of works that he has with other people. That includes his project with Jay-Z, and that includes his compilation album with Good Music. So all we're down to are 7 studio albums from the man we call Yeezus. I've changed this list about 3 or 4 times over the weekend, and I think I'm ready to do it now. I think I'm ready to go. So without further ado, let's just get started. Coming in at the bottom spot, Yeezus. Yeezus is probably Kanye West's most experimental hip-hop album, and although I can appreciate where Kanye is coming from a creative standpoint, at the time of the release of this project, I always asked myself why Kanye wanted to go down this path. It just seemed like he was trying to do something just because no one else that was such a high-profile rapper had been able to do. I just felt like he was trying his hand at something that he wasn't really experienced in, and that's okay. But releasing a full studio project, like a full album about this, with this sound, without kind of hearing any thoughts from maybe contemporaries or maybe from your fan base, maybe this would have been better released as a mixtape. Just something experimental, not as a studio album with actual marketing scheme behind it, and actually pushed as if this was a really good fleshed out project, because it just wasn't in my opinion. I had no favorites. I really had no good tracks on this body of work. There were better tracks than others, but nothing in here that I felt Kanye actually really fleshed out and put enough time into to be able to release and say this was a good project. I don't dislike this project just because it's experimental. I just dislike it because I feel like it's bad experimentation. There's nothing more to it. Which brings me to my next album, 808s and Heartbreak. Now you may be a little shocked at the placement of this project, but hear me out. This is the auto-tune Kanye. This is the electro Kanye. This is the harmonizing Kanye. This is the emotional Kanye. This is what I would like to call the lost Kanye. Again, I'm not really calling this album or this project bad. It's really just not Kanye's best material in my opinion. And I know in light of the situation that he was going through at the time, you know, losing his mother, having strong relationship issues, this album probably meant a lot for him. It was kind of like his crooning emotional album, and that's okay, that's fine. But the thing about Kanye, in my opinion, that kind of made this album such a hardship at times to get through was the fact that none of this actually seemed like it was like a genuine Kanye. I felt like Kanye expressed his emotions better through rapping about it as opposed to trying to croon and sing through it the whole time. And not to say that the sounds on here are like horrible. We have some tracks like Say You Will. It starts off extremely long-winded, talking about the relationship that he had at the time with his ex-fiance. And the length of this track is really what's unbearable when you consider the lack of subject matter or any kind of depth that it actually has. It's trying really hard to set up this somber feeling, which it does accomplish, but it feels less like he's connecting and more like he just happened to fall asleep in the studio with this whole instrumental on loop during the last 3 minutes of the song and just forgot to turn it off after the last verse. And Welcome to Heartbreak is another track on here that I actually did like at first, liking the violin intro that transitions into this bass. But the minute I saw Kid Cudi's name, I was just like, oh my god, like this is gonna be the harmonizing, humming anthem. And I like how honest this track is, where Kanye is talking about his regrets and the fact that he spent way too much time caring about his career, not actually developing personal relationships with people. He kind of regrets not being a dad at this point. Heartless and Love Lockdown were also really big tracks for Kanye on this project. Love Lockdown being a track from Kanye where he's actually trying to pull more from a woman than she's actually willing to give because her love is on lockdown. And on Heartless, Kanye really seems confident in the fact that he is a rapper that no longer exists just in the realm of hip-hop. And I would say my biggest issue with this album is the fact that Kanye, for the most part, doesn't evolve the same way the music does. And if there is any kind of evolution, the evolution isn't as good. It's just Kanye kind of singing his way through the album or harmonizing, which is a lane for Kanye I don't really think he's strong in. Like I said, the sounds have changed, but Kanye really hasn't. And yes, even on the most ridiculous parts of this album where the auto-tune is done to death, it's just like he took a shower and forgot that you have to wash all parts of your body before you get out. And Bad News is another track on this album that I like because of the Nina Simone Sea Lion Woman sample. The only reason I ended up liking this track as much as I did was because I had listened to Bruno Mars' Natalie song, and it was on Unorthodox Jukebox, so the Nina Simone sample showed up on Natalie as well. And I came back to 808s and Heartbreak a couple years after that, and I listened to it again, and I started liking it because it reminded me of the Bruno Mars song. So, Kanye, you take this W simply because of Bruno Mars, and that's it. I like this album and can appreciate it from a creative standpoint, and from the standpoint of Kanye's emotional trauma. And I'm not ignorant to the sound that people will pioneer from this album for years to come. But giving Kanye credit for something that he did by accident isn't really something that I find that much logic in. Like, do you think the guy who picked the lock and walked away, or do you think the guy who walked up to the door, turned the knob, and then opened it? Kanye is responsible for many lanes of creativity, and these lanes help people like The Weeknd and Travis Scott. You got Drake. But the thing about these artists where I don't get why people give Kanye credit for the sounds that they've continued to pioneer is they've all done these styles in extremely different ways. I mean, yes, the sound may have been popularized from someone like Kanye. Maybe they would have never heard about it, but they still fleshed it out into their own ideas. Then here's where life starts to get tough. 808s and Heartbreak wasn't a bad album. It just wasn't Kanye putting together anything that I felt was a powerful statement for emotional trauma, which is clearly what he was trying to represent with this project. The Life of Pablo. The Life of Pablo. What? Pablo! The Life of Pablo is Kanye West's most recent project, released in 2016, and I gotta say I got love for this project simply because I felt it could have been better released as a compilation album, considering the fact that it goes everywhere. It doesn't really have a cohesive idea. It's putting together ideas based off of maybe this fictional character, or maybe Kanye's just calling himself Pablo. I'm not really 100% sure of the theme of who this Pablo character is that Kanye presents within this album, but if it is the representation of someone else's life, I feel like it captures so many aspects of their life that it could easily be a compilation of work, which is why I felt there were some songs on here that actually were fleshed out pretty nice. You know, he had gospel ideas, he had technical music, he had tracks on here that literally blow some of his best songs out of the water. Tracks like Real Friends, tracks like Fade, tracks like Father Stretch My Hands Part 1 and 2, the original versions, Ultra Light Beam, and let's not forget the infamous No More Parties in LA. The thing that was so beautiful about No More Parties in LA for me was how much I came back to appreciate the song this year. All of you know that I recently discovered MF Doom, and listening to this song and understanding that Madlib was the one who produced it gave me nothing but MF Doom vibes. Like, I can easily see MF Doom rapping over this track, and the fact that Kanye and Kendrick do so well in pretty much capturing the essence of the song by constantly rapping and constantly keeping up the pace and the tempo makes the song extremely enjoyable for me. But if someone really wanted to, I'd recommend, and I'm not telling you to do this, but I am telling you to do this, go ahead and rip some of MF Doom's vocals and put it over this track and see if you like it. That's all I'm saying.
No more parties in LA. The softball for the game, man. She remember my sprint and said I was in the grave.
I think this album is perfectly placed on my list, considering the fact that at this point Kanye had so much time to flesh out ideas and to perfect this sound and completely reinvent himself again, but he just doesn't. I don't know why. Some of the songs on here just lack any kind of structure. If anything, I think this is Kanye's most empty project, with lyrics that don't mean anything half the time. And I understand, like, sometimes you're going to talk about things that other people can't relate to, but on this project, I feel like Kanye is so much further away from his fan base than he's ever really been before. Even if he has interludes on here where he talks about people kind of viewing him in a certain light by saying, I like the new Kanye, I like the old Kanye, I like the blah 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 Kanye, we get it. And the reason I say this could be a compilation is because of the massive amount of features that he has on here and the massive amount of sounds. Like, clearly some of these sounds are inspired from Chance the Rapper's recent coloring book that came out around that same year. He's got tracks with Post Malone, he's got a track with Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, Rihanna, so much so that on some tracks there's actually very little Kanye, and when he actually does give a performance, like I said, it's filled with empty lyrics half the time. Not a bad project, just a kind of semi-decent listen in comparison to Kanye's best work. That No More Parties in LA joint, I don't care if you hate the Life Pablo, you're bumping that one. You're bumping it. This is where life starts to get tricky. Graduation. This is the point in Kanye's career where a lot of the change started to come into play, and it became pretty apparent that he was aware of the fact that he was leaving the space of hip-hop and going in a totally different direction, kind of making music that catered a little bit more to the indie or the techno or the electronic side of things. And Kanye at this point in his career had made a conscious effort to go against other styles of hip-hop, that were more generic, that were more cliche. I remember, I think it was at this point where Kanye West and 50 Cent's album were kind of neck and neck and going head to head. So you had like gangster rap and then Kanye's alternative version of hip hop. I would have ranked this one higher, considering how many hits on this project Kanye actually had, from I Wonder to Champion to the track on here where he shouts out Chicago, Good Life with T-Pain. Like, there's a lot of good material on here. I think Flashing Lights was on here too. And the way I feel like Kanye's represented on the cover is if he's being catapulted into this whole new world without any safe spaces. You know, he's doing this pretty much all on his own, graduating. You know, he had his first project, College Dropout, then the next one, Late Registration, and this one will be Graduation, his third studio album. And to me, the way he's depicted on the album cover is kind of like he's graduating into this new form of music, into this totally different level of life. Not only do we get an evolution of Kanye as a rapper, but we get an evolution of Kanye's personal life, we get an evolution of Kanye's music. So in a way, it is a graduation. It's a stage away from school. He's no longer there. He's doing things on his own now. He's an adult. And I know he's been an adult since the very beginning, but this kind of represents, you know, the change in levels for Kanye. Again, this project really isn't bad to me. Like, there was a lot to enjoy with this project. Tracks where he talks about his relationship with Jay-Z, or the track on here with T-Pain, as I said before, where Kanye asks his listeners, have you ever popped champagne on a plane? Getting brain. At the time when I first heard this line, I thought it was really empty and pointless, but Kanye makes it a point to say later on in the same song that this is a lifestyle that he imagined way before he ever got to this position. So we kind of have the thought process or the mentality to some extent of a guy who's imagined the life that he's now rapping about. A pretty good album, not his best work. It would be higher, but we have other things that are better in my opinion. Late Registration. Late Registration is Kanye West's follow-up to College Dropout. And it was at this point where he stepped away for the first time from the traditional sounds of hip-hop, or the sounds that we were normally used to. This was a much more technical, more instrumentally focused, and even gets psychedelic at a lot of points in this project. And Ye's conscious effort to step away from the platitudes of rap at this point are very obvious, as we get instrumentals that are really dramatic and are very classical. I mean, this album was produced to such close perfection that there was a live studio version of it released. I mean, if you don't believe me when it references some classics, the first song, or the first few songs, we have something like Drive Slow, where he uses Tupac's Shorty Like a Thug and kind of puts this jazzy blues interpretation of the song over it. A track where Kanye pretty much talks about going through life and wanting things to happen sooner than he should. Don't be in such a hurry to go through life. Crack Music is another amazing track on here where Kanye compares slinging music to dope dealing, saying this is what people need to be fiending for. He's aware of the situation where there's a lot of fatherless homes and a lot of single mothers. I think what he's hoping for on this track is for people who feel low to instead come to the music as opposed to going out, dealing drugs, being criminal. Kanye, in my opinion, needs to be commended on the feature length, because he perfectly places the game on this track without forcing this extra on the song just to make it so that the game is so much more a part of the song. He just has the game on the hook. Bring Me Down is where I kind of started to see the flaws with some of this project, because Kanye wasn't giving a vocal performance that was on the same level of some of the orchestral sound. Bring Me Down is a track that has this very dramatic piano, like I said, with the very orchestral music in the background. It sounds beautiful, and Brandy's vocals are pretty good, but I feel like Kanye's performance is just way too simplistic, or the style or the manner in which he's tackling his verse is just so tame and held back when you consider how beautiful the sounds of the music are. It's like Kanye's way too simplistic and the music is so much more complicated. The same thing kind of happens on the track Addiction, and that's probably my biggest issue with this project in general, is the fact that there's a lot of points on this project where Kanye is not at the same level as his production. Like I said, sonically there's a lot to appreciate with this project. Like the James Bond sample on Diamonds from Sierra Leone, with the Shirley Bassey vocals looped in the background. And there's also a theme running through this project with the skits that doesn't necessarily tie into the theme of Late Registration. I mean, we get to the point in the skits where at the end of the skits they start to explain that We're Broke as Hell is kind of like a hypocrisy of black folks. Like at some points they're so proud of having nothing that they want other people to be proud of that too. They don't want them to excel or succeed. At one point, Kanye is included on the skit where he's really confused and doesn't know why they're coming at him for being successful or trying to become better. And it's kind of alluding to the fact that you shouldn't be proud of yourself for having nothing. You should just be proud of yourself for not allowing your possessions to own you. Like, there's nothing wrong with having property. Overall production on this project needs to be commended, considering the fact that Kanye was doing this really when no one else was. And I would say no one really had the balls to go out on a limb like this and make an album that was so much further away from what hip-hop was originally sounding like at the time. And a lot of people don't think it's that far of a stretch, but considering what Kanye did with this project in comparison to what was already out there, like Lil Wayne's The Carter 2, The Game's documentary, The Massacre from 50 Cent that outsold Late Registration, Kanye was doing something that was very ballsy. This is where life began to get really hard for me, because I didn't know at what point and why I wanted to rank these two albums the way I did. The number one spot will help to explain why my number two is my number two. So let's just get through number two, and then I can explain number two through number one. College Dropout. On this project, Kanye actually seems like he is so deeply invested into the genre. He's deeply connected to the fan base. He's making really considerate music, and probably one of Kanye's most personal projects when it comes to his connection to his fan base. It's like the things that affect every other person also affect Kanye. Like, he's actually one of the people on this project. One of my favorite tracks on here being Spaceship, considering how relatable it actually is. It's like a blues-inspired rap song while trying to explain the struggles of just getting by and being an everyday human. But it specifically mentions working a job that you know isn't worth it.
I wish I could buy me a spaceship.
His singing voice. The singing voice. Just blues. I'll buy you a spaceship. I think I like Get 'Em High so much because not only does it detail Kanye's encounter with a chick off Black Planet, the way he features Quelly in this track by basically saying that he knows him and he puts him on the phone to continue the conversation with the chicks is fucking just glorious. The new Workout, which did I mention is a song you can actually work out to, where it's Kanye's workout regimen to help women find a man. And the skits on this project actually help to convey this message that Kanye believes that college is somewhat of a waste of time and people put way too much value on a piece of paper. Skits in here that actually have a lot to do with people valuing them too high, but not understanding that if you're not working, if you're not moving forward, that degree don't mean shit. And the brilliant two-word flow that they keep on two words helps tie the theme of the song together that much more. And I think the Harlem Choir Boys do an amazing job with the orchestral piece that comes right before their vocal demolition at the end of the track. And I didn't appreciate the brilliance that was Through the Wire until I heard it like a billion times and realized that Kanye West was rapping like his mouth was wired shut. The references, the witty lines, the funny bars, like where he references being kind of lucky because Michael Jackson wasn't, in comparison to the Pepsi accident. And Last Call is another track on here where Kanye perfectly explains how he got in the position that he's in right now and all the hurdles that you know, coming into the industry, how he got connected to certain people, ended up meeting Dame and Jay-Z, wanting to make a beat for DMX, his relationship with Quayle, and how he ended up with Rockefeller. I like how this project has so many uncredited features when it comes to like the track list, and they're kind of like Easter eggs put on this track for the listener to go, oh my god, does that sound like so-and-so? Because the intro track for the voice character sounds a lot like Bernie Mac. The feature from Ludacris isn't listed, so when you hear it, it's a nice surprise. Constantly pulling on those heartstrings and making people feel that strong sense of nostalgia. And I really do think that College Dropout is a classic album for Kanye West. It just felt like Kanye represented himself on this project as being a regular Joe. And that's something that a lot of people at the time could get down with, myself included. But that's why my #1 spot is my #1 spot. My beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. This marks Kanye's official return back to hip-hop from the experimentation of 808s and Heartbreak, from his experimentation with Graduation. This kind of marks Kanye's official return back to the genre, so much so that he included people like No ID, Mike Dean, RZA for production. So I guess before I get into the track listing, I should explain why this is my #1 and not my #2 or my #3. I get people saying that his lyrics are corny from time to time, that they're kind of hard to identify with, which in my opinion they aren't. If anything, I can see some of his lyrics on this project being very empty or just simply unrelatable. But one thing I think people fail to mention about this album is how, as a piece of art from a guy who has reinvented himself time and time and time and time again, this refreshingly sits at a very high point in his career. If I could put both my beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and College Dropout as my #1 spot, I would, because they're both extremely high points in Kanye's career. But I'm not just going based off the one that made me feel good. I'm not going based off the one that just gave me the strongest sense of nostalgia. And I'm not picking the album because it's relatable. My beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is an album that, in my opinion, is composed and produced better. Conceptually, it takes more risks. It's an album without training wheels, without a parachute, without a safety net. And what I mean is, it doesn't simply exist as a throwback reminder of a bunch of old music that you were already used to and already liked. I get having a lack of interest in Kanye's personal life, but not liking this simply because you can't relate to it is really where I have the issue. I'm not saying Kanye West's life as a man in the limelight is something that I'm just laying in bed fetishizing, but the point I'm trying to make here is, but if I could write your lyrics, why would I want to hear them from you? I think the lack of being able to identify with this project has led to such strange criticisms of it. My question is, when did relatability become a requirement in hip-hop? It's so hypocritical to have this requirement of rappers that, like, oh, you gotta be transformative. You gotta be different. You gotta bring fresh, new ideas. You gotta be advanced, pristine. But you also gotta remind me of the past. You gotta pay homage. You gotta know your roots, man. That's literally why so many people hold College Dropout to such a high regard. You don't want rappers to evolve, you just want them to make you feel good. I'm not insulting you, but I'm just asking, are you that one-dimensional that the only way you get enjoyment out of a song is if someone regurgitates the experiences that you've already lived? It's like wanting to buy a book that you already know the ending to. The basic requirement of a song shouldn't just be limited to a mirror of your own reality. Take something as simple as a video game, which from time to time I find myself enjoying. But why are these video games so enjoyable? Because more often than not, or 9 times out of 10, they are the furthest thing from our reality humanly possible. These games, these movies, these reality TV shows, some of the music we listen to, these are all our own beautiful dark twisted fantasies. And maybe for a few hours out of a week after work, people are able to escape from the life they live and imagine themselves in a different position, or imagine themselves doing something else, or have a good time away from their reality for a moment. Not to say that your reality has to be bad for you to enjoy time away from it, but do you realize the lack of staying power any music, books, movies, or games would have on us if they were just mirrors of our own reality? If they were just replicas of our everyday lives? That's where I feel like my beautiful dark twisted fantasy actually shines. It's giving us a perspective or some kind of sound from an album that hasn't been regurgitated, that hasn't given us nostalgia. I would prefer to listen to a project that is fresh. I would prefer to listen to an album that has new sounds, new ideas from an artist that just reinvented himself. And that's what production on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy actually is. People also forget to mention that the first 9 tracks of the album are bliss, are bless, are amazing. From Gorgeous with Kid Cudi, who gets on the hook with this infectious rhythm with the electric guitar behind him. It's like rock and roll rap. Kanye on this track, and this isn't limited to just this track, talks about social inequalities with Raekwon. People forget how big Power was. On this track, Kanye speaks as if he's at this god level, and he has the demeanor as if he's about to take no survivor. The transition from All the Lights interlude into the actual song is ridiculous, while Rihanna's vocals come in over these drums that slowly transition into Kanye's verse. And many people don't know that this track also includes vocal performances from Elton John, Drake, Kid Cudi, John Legend, etc. Devil in a New Dress, which is probably my favorite track on the album, with the Smokey Robinson Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow sample. You know how much of a fan of soul music that I am. Hearing this and not knowing Smokey Robinson would have been a sin for me. My parents would have disowned me. Kanye's inclusion of lust and love as he intertwines like humanity and religion to explain this devil in a new dress, not in a blue dress, in a new one. New is used in this title as opposed to blue to insinuate that devil is in new clothing this time. It's not just in this traditional blue dress that everyone says it is. And Rick Ross features really well on soul tracks. And the perfect thing about this track that has me wanting more is the abrupt ending to it, because it'll end out of nowhere and it'll have you like, wait, no, I need more. Wait. Runaway starts with this really low-key piano that has the vocals "Look at Ya" running from one side of your ear to the other side. I remember seeing Kanye perform this song live, and I remember the energy. It was so infectious. There were people crying in the crowd to this song because it was Kanye's acknowledgement of the fact that he's a bit of an asshole. And I think the piano adds to like this somber feeling that the track already gives you, where Kanye's saying, "Where's the love for one of us?" And it's almost like he's explaining why he's so difficult to love, kind of trying to explain he doesn't really know how to love, how to be that person. I like it because it doesn't stick to those same cliches and would-bes of, you gotta be a good person. What if you're not a good person? Everybody likes to say they're a good person, but not everybody is, okay? If we lived in that type of world where everyone was a good person, half the events wouldn't be happening the way they are. Can't all be these amazing people. I just don't believe it. So hearing Kanye's realistic interpretation or take on basically humanity and kind of acknowledging that there are so many of these types of people roaming around is amazing for me. The Monsterverse with Nicki Minaj and Jay-Z and Rick Ross. I'll admit there are some weaker tracks, but for the most part, being able to have a 14-track album and me walk away with about 12 songs that I'm in love with is a dope thing. But I guess it's not enough to just say these songs are great. I should let you hear a few of them too.
In that magic hour, I seen good Christians make rash decisions. Oh, she do message breakups, the casualty of tours. How she gon' wake up? LeBron a rhyme. Hard to be humble when you stunting on a jumbotron. I'm looking at her like this what you
feel is slowly drifting away from me. Nothing proceeded. I dreamed it.
Hearing these albums again over the last 3.5 weeks have reminded me why Kanye is gonna go down in the best artist category of all time. I'm not just giving My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy the spotlight because it's my favorite. I'm giving it the spotlight because it's Kanye's most ambitious work. One of his most sonically impressive albums, and Kanye really sets himself apart from all of his contemporaries with this album to me. So that's my list in my ranking order. We have Yeezus at the bottom spot. We got 808s and Heartbreak after that, The Life of Pablo. After that, Graduation. After that, then we got Late Registration. Then we got College Dropout. Then we got My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Thank you all for watching. It's been Shawn C. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what your list is, why you feel your list is more appropriate, and tell me why College Dropout is so much better than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I'm not arguing with you that it might be, but I'm going based off the one that took more risks, that's more explorative, that's more adventurous, and gets the job done. He takes hip-hop to a new level as opposed to keeping it popular with the same cliches that everyone else already does. Oh, my heart hurts. I'm gonna go listen to all these albums again because they just reminded me of how great Kanye is. Hopefully he comes out with a new project soon that's even better than this one. Doubtful, but hopeful. I'll see you next time. Peace.